Hey all here, OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Conquest F2. This is a mini rugged Android smartphone that is really small. Actually, the screen here measures just under 3 inches diagonally. It's almost the size of a standard kind of credit card that you may have. So in this day and age where our phones are just getting larger and larger, it really is kind of a reverse trend in a sense. As a quick refresher of what we discussed in our unboxing, the F2 has decent specs considering its tiny size, such as 3 gigs of built-in RAM, and all of the essential connectivity options including 4G bands, support for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, and even built-in NFC. The back cover is removable as we discussed in our unboxing, and you can switch out the battery even, and underneath the battery is where you'll find the micro SD card slot for expanding the built-in memory. Now, as a rugged phone, this device is fully IP68 waterproof, it's also dust-proof, shock-proof, has Corning Gorilla Glass 5 in the front, so the display itself is also shock-proof, so it does feel extremely rugged and durable in the hands. Because it is a little bit on the thicker side, it packs in a rather impressive 3,700 milliamp hour capacity battery for, again, a credit card size 3-inch phone. And because the screen size is so small, in my usage, I actually was able to get it to run for about 3 days before I needed to recharge it again. So it really is pretty good endurance. Now on the rear here, we also have access to a 13 megapixel single lens autofocus camera with a dual tone LED flash. The top here also features a torch. This is a special function in the Pro or Luxury edition of the F2 that sells for slightly more than the standard model that begins at $150. So the Pro edition also includes a few specialties such as a dock that you get in the box for helping you charge the phone without even needing to open up the flap to access the Type-C port. It uses these pogo contacts, and also includes a free kind of belt carrying case as part of the package. Finally, the Pro edition also gives you a fingerprint scanner on the side that we also discussed in our unboxing. Now this is a always-on fingerprint scanner, so even if the display of the phone is off, I can put my finger on it and the phone's screen will unlock automatically. So it actually works pretty well. It has a slight indentation and it's pretty fast and responsive. Another part about this phone, just like the larger sibling, the S16 Pro, that I liked is how much you can customize it. You can even engrave the template logo on the back if you wanted to when you purchase it from their store, and there's also some customizable reprogrammable keys, function keys on the left, the right sides that can be remapped to do different things when you double tap or long hold on them. Right now I have it set up so that the red key here, if I long hold, will activate the torch, as you can see there, as a quick shortcut, even if the phone's display is turned off. Now there are a few physical buttons on the front of the phone, including one that can physically turn the phone's display on or off if you are using a password or face unlock with the front-facing 5 megapixel camera, and there's also a dedicated home key on the middle here that you can press down. There's also a dialer key that will bring up the controls for making a phone call, and there's 2 virtual keys that you can tap on that will take you back as well as open up the multitasking. One of the other specialties on this phone is also the front-facing speaker that gets up to 120 decibels. It's extremely loud, and for something so small, it can actually be used as a siren. We'll be doing a quick speaker test later on in this video, but even at almost 20% volume, if you're playing back music, the speaker gets just insanely loud and fills up the entire room. So very impressive there. It can be used for emergency situations as well to get people's attention when they hear that you're nearby. Alright, so moving on into the software experience, I will say that, again, the bezels on this phone's display are a little on the large side, but overall, since it's still very compact, I think it's forgivable and also adds a bit more to the ruggedness of the device. It is a IPS panel, so it has pretty good viewing angles, and the visibility is also decent, even if you're outdoors. I wish it could get maybe a touch brighter, but at the same time, it still is perfectly usable even when there's some sunlight hitting across it. It's very sensitive and easy to use, and under regular navigation, the processor seems to keep up with your tasks and swipes without any delays or lag, which is great to see. It is technically running on a quad-core chipset powered by MediaTek, clocked upwards to 2 GHz. So we can launch into, say, a quick look at the camera first. I would say it's nothing spectacular, although it is certainly functional. We can apply things like different scene filters that you can see there. We can also take a look at changing the resolution, geotagging, very simple interface overall. Taking a quick look at some of these shots, overall, if you hold still using the autofocus sensor, you can still get some decent looking images. Partly because the screen is so small, it is a pretty dense panel, so you still get plenty of sharpness. But of course, if you're doing a lot of media watching, a larger screen would feel more comfortable, but still surprisingly usable. Colors for the most part look fairly accurate, and if you're using it for capturing some kind of close-up objects, it still makes out the details without too many problems. In good lighting, it actually is a passable camera, pretty average though for 2020 standards. Alright, so the takeaway is impressively loud for something so small on a tiny phone, and again, it's front-facing, so it's going to be much harder to cover up. Now, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is you also still have a standard 3.5mm headphone jack on this phone, so you can plug in standard headphones to enjoy music in private, or you can use wireless ones with Bluetooth as well, so overall, pretty good. You also see here how loading up videos on YouTube is a pretty snappy experience. Again, daily navigation is surprisingly swift. You can scrub between parts of the video and it will still play back almost instantly. Again, colors on the display are actually surprisingly punchy looking and pretty enjoyable for just looking at some very quick images with. Of course, if you're watching a full-blown movie, something so small, it's not going to be as ideal as on our 6-inch phones and laptops these days. Let's talk about the web browsing experience next. We can try to load up a page like The Verge. We can see how the keyboard is definitely tiny, and perhaps one of the biggest cons in general of a tiny phone or something that's closer to a smartwatch in terms of size is it's going to be harder to type things out. But you can also use voice search instead. The keyboard here, by the way, by default is just the standard Gboard, so it supports swipe as well, and you can also flip it in terms of the orientation, of course, to get a slightly larger canvas. But anyways, here it is loading up a pretty complex site, The Verge, and of course it's going to be a little bit longer than on, say, a flagship phone. It has lots of ads and kind of video elements and text that's loading along. Sites that are a bit more optimized will load back still very quickly, as we can see here, and overall not a shabby web browsing experience. Again, the phone doesn't feel too slow because it does have 3 gigs of RAM, which is also decent. I would say better than, you know, some budget phones these days, which only come with 2 gigs still. It does allow you to do a bit more multitasking, so you can open up, say, 5 or 6 tabs and still enjoy that experience. If you want to kind of long hold on an application, you can open it up in one tab and kind of do another tab on the bottom section here, opening up 2 screens at once. But that's kind of insane on a display so small. But again, you can take advantage of all of those built-in functions from Android. The same thing goes with picture-in-picture mode, by the way. So if I was playing back that video from earlier and I wanted to go onto the home screen, you can see it floats up as a small box as I'm doing some other tasks. As we've touched on previously, there's a handful of pre-loaded applications, including a compass tool that takes advantage of the compass and accelerometers that you can use when you're outdoors. And there's also a built-in FM radio. In addition, you also get access to a remote control app. That's another feature found on the Pro Edition, is a built-in infrared sensor here that you can use to control TVs and other appliances. And finally, there's some other things on here, like an old man's desktop. That's basically another UI that you can switch into that will reduce the number of applications that you see displayed for a more simplified view, almost resembling a dumb phone. So if you want to use it more simply, you can also choose that launcher which comes pre-installed. This one here though, by default, I think is the closest to stock Android, or you can also try something like Nova Launcher if you want to get a different experience. The phone call quality is also quite good. It supports all the 4G bands worldwide unlocked, so you can use it with AT&T and T-Mobile in the States, for instance, as a GSM phone, and I consistently got near full bars of reception in the Seattle area when testing it out earlier. The microphone does pick up your voice really well, and also again the speaker quality is very loud, especially if you use the speakerphone, so no issues at all when it comes to just making phone calls. Now, last but not least, let's take a closer look at how it works in terms of the gaming performance. So again, the processor on here is by no means a flagship chip, but it will still run kind of simpler titles, especially 2D ones, really without any problems. The screen is nice and responsive. Although loading times won't be instantaneous, overall you still get a decent enough experience, especially again for things like Stack, Angry Birds. Simpler titles and older ones will run flawlessly, in fact, without any issues. You're just kind of restricted by a smaller screen. So that's why I recommend simpler games anyways. If you're getting into the territory of things like PUBG or action-based with lots of fine text details, that becomes a little harder for you to kind of make out on such a small screen. You have to squint. Overall, surprisingly, I like this phone more than I was expecting. Since it's such a tiny device, I thought initially it's just such a novelty item, but really the ergonomics just feel very comfortable using this phone one-handed. Also, some of the touches on here, like the always-on fingerprint scanner, just working really well, fluidity of the UI working nicely, makes it a decent phone, making a very durable device that you don't feel bad about just tossing into a bag, taking with you when camping, or going outdoors into the extreme where you need something that will last you a long time in terms of the endurance and battery life, but doesn't weigh you down and, become too distracting. So if you're interested in a compact device, this might be worth a closer look, especially one that's really rugged. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the surprisingly fun mini Android smartphone.